Many middle and high school students are expected to read complex text without ever being explicitly taught the skills needed to understand them. We tell students to read the chapter, identify the main idea, analyze the argument, or explain the theme. But what happens when a student cannot break apart an unfamiliar academic word? What if the student cannot untangle a complex sentence, recognize how a passage is organized, or determine when a comprehension is broken down? These students are often given more reading assignments, but not necessarily more reading instruction. In this video, we will examine the reading skills that secondary students are frequently expected to use, but are not always explicitly taught. We will also look at how targeted instruction in these skills can help struggling readers become more successful and independent. Before we begin, welcome. This channel is for grades 6 through 12 teachers who want practical, research-aligned strategies for identifying reading gaps and helping struggling readers build the skills they need for success. Be sure to subscribe and follow the Secondary Reading Blueprint series. And let's get started. Assigned reading is not reading instruction. By secondary level, reading is often treated as a skill students should already possess. Students are assigned novels, textbook chapters, primary sources, scientific explanations, articles, and word problems. Teachers may preview vocabulary, ask comprehension questions, or provide a graphic organizer. These supports can be helpful, but they do not always teach students how to process the text. Reading instruction requires us to make the invisible work of a skilled reader visible. That means showing students how to approach an unfamiliar word, break down a complicated sentence, connect ideas, monitor understanding, and determine which information matters. When we assign reading without teaching these processes, students who already know how to comprehend usually succeed. Students who lack these skills continue to struggle. So the missing skill number 1, how to read multisyllabic words. By middle and high school, students encounter increasingly long and specialized words, such as industrialization, photosynthesis, constitutional, incompatible, biodiversity. Students are often told what these words mean, but they may never been taught how to read and analyze them independently. Some students guess from the first few letters. Others skip the word or wait for someone to pronounce it. Explicit instruction can teach students to identify familiar prefixes and suffixes, locate vowels and syllable patterns, break longer words into manageable parts, blend those parts accurately, check whether the word makes sense in the sentence. This is not elementary instruction presented to older students. It's age-appropriate word analysis that gives adolescents access to secondary level content. If a student cannot read the important words in a passage accurately and efficiently, comprehension will always be more difficult. Missing skill number 2, how word parts reveal meaning. Middle and high school students are expected to learn thousands of academic and content-specific words. It's impossible to teach every word individually. Students need a system for approaching unfamiliar vocabulary. Morphology, the study of meaningful word parts, provides that system. Prefixes, suffixes, and Greek and Latin roots often help students unlock families of related words. For example, once students understand that the root struct relates to building, they have a starting point for understanding words such as structure, construct, reconstruct, and infrastructure. Students should be taught to identify meaningful word parts, explain what each word part means, combine those meanings, and use sentence context and confirm the definition. This process is more reliable than simply telling students to use context clues. Context matters, but context clues alone are not always enough. Students need multiple tools for determining word meaning. Missing skill number 3, how to read complex sentences. Sometimes students understand every individual word in a sentence, but still cannot explain what the sentence means. The problem may be sentence level comprehension. Academic sentences often contain multiple clauses, embedded details, unfamiliar transitions, passive voice, pronoun references, long introduction phrases, important relationships between ideas. Consider what happens when a student reaches the end of a long sentence and cannot identify who did what, which idea is most important, or how the details are connected. Rereading the sentence without the strategy may solve the problem. Students need to be shown how to locate the sentence central idea, separate essential information from added details, identify transition words, connect pronouns to their reference, and restate the meaning in their simple language. Sentence comprehension is one of the most important bridges between reading individual words and understanding an entire passage. Missing skill number 4, how fluency supports comprehension. Fluency sometimes is misunderstood as reading quickly, but effective fluency involves accuracy, appropriate pacing, phrasing, expression, and attention to meaning. A student may read aloud without making many errors and still use phrasing that interferes with comprehension. Another student may read so slowly that it becomes difficult to hold the ideas together. Secondary students can benefit from explicit instruction in how punctuation, sentence structure, and meaning guide phrasing. Teachers can model fluent reading, ask students to mark meaningful phrases, provide opportunities for repeated readings, and help students reflect on how their reading sounds and whether it makes sense. The purpose is not simply to increase speed. The purpose is to help students read efficiently enough that their attention can shift from identifying words to understanding ideas. All right, missing skill number 5, how to recognize when meaning breaks down. Skilled readers notice when they are confused. They stop, reread, slow down, examine an unfamiliar word, look for a connection, or summarize what they have learned so far. Struggling readers may continue moving their eyes across the page without realizing that meaning has been lost. Telling those students to read it again is not enough. They need to know what to do differently during the second reading. Students should learn to ask, what part stopped making sense? Is unfamiliar words creating the problem? Is the sentence too complex? Did I miss an important connection? Do I need to reread, read ahead, break the sentence apart, or use another source? Comprehension monitoring gives students a way to recognize a problem and select a strategy that matches it. Without this skill, students remain dependent on the teacher to notice and repair confusion for them. Missing skill number 6, how text structure organizes ideas. Many students are taught the names of common text structures such as cause and effect, compare and contrast, problem and solution, sequence and description. But recognizing a label is only the beginning. Students also need to understand how structure helps them follow the writer's thinking. They should be able to determine which ideas are being compared, which events caused a particular outcome, what problem is being addressed, how steps or events are ordered, why the author shifts from one structure to another. More challenging text often contains several structures within the same passage. When students understand how a text is organized, they can anticipate the kinds of information they will encounter, identify relationships among ideas, and remember what they can have read more efficiently. So missing skill number 7, how to identify what matters. Students are frequently asked to find the main idea or summarize a passage, but many are not explicitly taught how to distinguish central ideas from examples, explanations, evidence, and minor details. As a result, some students copy entire sentences from the text. Others select an interesting fact rather than an important idea. Some include so many details that their summary becomes nearly as long as the original passage. Students need a clear process for determining what the passage is mainly about, what the author wants readers to understand, which details are essential, which details are examples or elaboration, how the ideas develop across the text. Summarizing is not simply shortening a passage. It requires students to understand the text hierarchy of ideas and communicate its essential meaning accurately. All right, missing skill number 8, how to connect ideas and make inferences. Teachers often ask students to make an inference or read between the lines, but students may not understand the thinking process behind an inference. An inference is not a guess. It's a conclusion based on textual evidence combined with logical reasoning or relevant background knowledge. Students need to be taught how to identify the question they are trying to answer, locate relevant evidence in the text, explain what that evidence can suggest, and connect the evidence to what they already know. Form a conclusion that stays within the boundaries of the text. They also need instruction in connecting ideas across sentences, paragraphs, and sections. If a student treats every sentence as an isolated piece of information, they will struggle to understand that larger meaning of a text. All right, missing skill number 9, how to evaluate information. Secondary students are expected to evaluate claims, evidence, reasoning, sources, biases, and author's perspective. These are complex reading skills, and students cannot apply them successfully if they have only been given a checklist of questions. They need to see the thinking process modeled. For example, what exactly is the author claiming? What evidence is providing? Is that evidence relevant to the claim? Is there enough evidence? Is the source reliable? Does the reasoning connect to the evidence of the claim? What language reveals the author's perspective? What information may have been omitted? Students also need opportunities to compare sources, distinguish fact from interpretation, and recognize how images, statistics, headlines, and media techniques can influence an audience. In a world filled with constant information, critical reading is no longer an optional enrichment skill. It is essential. So, why these skills are often missed? Most secondary teachers recognize the importance of these skills. The problem is that the structure of secondary education does not always make explicit reading instruction easy. Content area teachers may have large amounts of required material to cover. ELL teachers must balance reading, writing, literature, language, and assessment standards. Interventionists and special education teachers may serve students with widely different needs in the same class. Teachers may know that a student does not understand a text but still lacks the time, diagnostic information, or instructional materials needed to determine why. As a result, important reading processes may be mentioned briefly, assigned for practice, or assumed to have been taught in an earlier grade. This is not about blaming elementary or secondary teachers. It's about recognizing that reading development continues beyond the elementary years, and secondary students still need explicit instruction. So, what effective secondary reading instruction looks like? It begins by identifying the skill, creating the barrier. The teacher then explains the skill clearly, models the thinking processes, guides students through supportive practices, provides immediate feedback, gradually reduces the support, gives students opportunities to apply the skill independently, connects the skill to authentic secondary level text. This explicit progression is especially important for students who have struggled for several years. They do not need another worksheet that tests whether they already possess the skill. They need instruction that shows them how to perform it. The secondary reading blueprint provides a structured pathway for teaching the literacy skills that older students may be missing. Rather than treating reading difficulty as one general problem, it helps teachers identify the specific skill, creating the barrier, and provide targeted, explicit instruction. The program addresses the full progression of secondary literacy from word analysis, vocabulary, fluency, and sentence comprehension to complex text analysis, critical reading, writing, research, and independent application. Teachers can follow the complete instructional sequence or select the units and lessons that match their students' needs. The goal is simple: identify the gap, teach the missing skill clearly, and help students apply it confidently across increasingly complex text. These skills can still be taught. When secondary students struggle with reading, it's easy to focus on everything they cannot do. But a missing skill is not a fixed limitation. When teachers identify the barrier and provide explicit, age-appropriate instruction, students can develop strategies they may have been missing for years. A student can learn to break apart an unfamiliar word. A student can learn to untangle a difficult sentence. A student can learn to monitor understanding, follow the structure of text, connect ideas, evaluate evidence, and explain meaning. The goal is not to lower the complexity of what students are expected to understand. The goal is to give them the tools they need to access that complexity. Many of the reading skills secondary students need are frequently assumed rather than explicitly taught. Students may be asked to read more, work harder, or answer additional comprehension questions without being shown how proficient readers make meaning from complex text. Effective instruction intervention changes that question. Instead of asking, why can't this student understand the passage, we begin asking, what specific reading process does this student still need to learn? Once we identify the missing skill, we can teach it directly, model it clearly, and provide supported practice until the student can apply it independently. This is how we move from assigning reading to actually teaching students how to read complex text. If this video helped you identify reading skills your middle or high school students may be missing, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. For practical research-aligned strategies and targeted reading intervention resources for grades 6 through 12, visit HelpULearn.org to learn more about the Secondary Reading Blueprint. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.